Hello, it's a pleasure to be here to talk to you about what we're trying to do at the University of British Columbia in Vancouver to embed sustainability deeply into the sort of very fiber of the University of British Columbia, and in so doing change its identity in a significant way. I want to begin with a few words about the way sustainability is looked at in our culture. I think the history of sustainability, which of course is rooted in the environmental science literature, especially in the 1960s and 70s, but even before that as well, has been a story about limits, about constraints, about transgressing planetary boundaries, to pick a currently prominent use of this kind of language. It's a storyline about the damage we do to the planet and the need, therefore, to reduce the harm we do. A story of harm reduction, damage limitation, mitigation, a story of cutting back. Often it's a story of sacrifice. When I say story here, I'm not talking about the science itself, but really about how that science has been interpreted as a kind of cultural storyline or narrative. This is the way sustainability gets presented to the mythical person in the street. If you stop someone in the street of Toronto and say, what does sustainability mean to you? If they've ever heard the word, they will say something like the need to cut back, the need to reduce our impact. They'll talk about the problems of human activity causing damage. So this has become, I think, the prevalent or dominant cultural storyline. And there's at least four problems with this as a sort of cultural narrative. The first is that it's not motivating. It really doesn't engage people. They don't leap to be at the forefront of the bandwagon of cutting back and join the social movement of sacrifice. It just is an unmotivating agenda. This is a problem if we really want to change the world, because we have to actually, sustainability implies changes that require the engagement of pretty much everyone in the planet over time. They're non-trivial changes. So if we're starting with a storyline that isn't appealing to people, that's a real problem. We need to be aware of the difficulties that poses. The second problem is that even if it was motivating, it doesn't go far enough anyway. Simply reducing damage and harm is not good enough. There's a lot of damage and harm already been done. There's a lot of problems already out there that need to be resolved, where we have to go beyond harm reduction to be restorative or regenerative. We need solutions and ways forward that actually make things better, not simply make them less bad. The third problem is that the way the story is told, it's mainly an environmental story. There is a whole discussion, of course, about consumption and human behavior, but almost always that's framed as a way to address environmental problems. And so we need to change behavior for that kind of purpose. What's less prevalent is human well-being as opposed to environmental integrity or well-being for its own sake. And this is ironic because the term sustainability was actually coined precisely to add social and economic factors to the environmental discussion. Nevertheless, it has tended to revert back to a primarily environmentally driven agenda. So that's a problem. And finally, it's quite scientistic. The implicit assumption in a lot of the literature about limits and boundaries and needs to cut back is that that science tells us true things about the real world, and we have to listen to science. We have to find out what it tells us, and it will tell us how to live and what to do. This more or less ignores about 100 years of work in science studies that demonstrates that the relationship between science and policy and science and knowledge is a little more complex than that. It isn't a single absolute voice of absolute truth. So these are the problems that led us to pose a slightly different way of thinking about sustainability. We call it regenerative sustainability. Can we have forms of human activity that move from being response to sustainability problems that move from trying to be less bad to trying to be more good? Can we move from reducing damage to creating benefits, from sacrifice to contribution? Or to put it in the language of the building literature, from net zero to net positive buildings and programs and developments. The goal of regenerative sustainability is pretty simple. We want forms of human activity that don't have to be minimized because they're damaging, but forms of human activity that simultaneously increase human and environmental well-being. Notice the two key aspects of this description of regenerative sustainability. First of all, it's both environmental and human well-being. It's not one in the service of the other. They're both independently valuable. And secondly, it's about being net positive in both arenas, about going beyond harm reduction into benefit creation. Now, the interesting thing about this approach to sustainability, which we believe to be much more engaging and more far-reaching than traditional approaches, is that we just don't know very much about where it can be done. It's not that everything can be regenerative and we just change our framing and suddenly the world is easy to solve. There are huge problems, some of which cannot be addressed except by reducing damage or harm. So we're not saying don't do harm reduction or damage limitation. We're saying before you do that, look for opportunities for regenerative sustainability. What scales and what processes can we be regenerative at? It's always better to be net positive than simply to do harm reduction, but we don't know yet. Can we do regenerative buildings? Well, I'm going to talk in a few minutes about one we have built to that end. I think the answer to that is yes. Could we have regenerative industrial processes, regenerative transportation systems, regenerative cities? Surely we would all want to live in a city that through its normal operating procedure improves human and environmental well-being. That's the kind of city we'd all like to live in. But we don't know the answer to that question because we haven't turned our mind to it enough. This is a huge opportunity for universities to explore this question. Where can we be regenerative? How can we find forms of human activity that improve, simultaneously improve human and environmental well-being? So that's the framework that we adopt, and that leads us to the role of the university. I think the university in modern society is increasingly being asked to show its value in ways that weren't true 20 or 30 years ago when you just held out your hand and you got funding because you were good. Now society is demanding more. It's saying, what have you done for me lately? What role is your university playing? How is it helping to solve the very serious societal problems we're faced with? I think that demand is out there, and I think universities have a unique role to play in responding to that demand. And it's unique because we have four characteristics that no other institution has. We are single owner occupiers of significant capital stock at a very interesting scale. You notice I put the word owner in brackets because in many European universities, for example, the university does not own the land it sits on. It's actually, or the buildings either. They're the property of the state and they're leased or rented by the university. In North America, in Canada, we own the land the university sits on and the building stock as well. So that gives us an even more powerful ability to act. But even if you're a single occupier, a renter or a leaser of this capital stock, the point is that you're single. You're a single decision maker over a very interesting scale of activity. At UBC, the scale is 400 buildings on 400 hectares of land. That's a really interesting scale because it's an urban neighborhood scale. And every city on the planet is struggling with sustainability issues at that scale, how to make their neighborhoods more sustainable in environmental and human terms. Universities are naturally operating at that scale, and it's a single decision maker legally. Of course, it's more complex than that. Universities reproduce all the complexity of the universe inside their borders. They're kind of fractal in that way. Nevertheless, legally, it's one entity. So the university can act at that scale. That's number one. The second one is the universities have a public mandate. In Canada, almost all our universities are actually publicly owned. They're not private universities, but even private universities in other parts of the world have a mandate that goes beyond merely making money, making a profit. There's a public mandate. That means they can act in the public interest. At UBC, we will accept a 15-year payback on capital investments that have an academic purpose. No one in the private sector can accept a 15-year payback on anything. They're in a market economy. Universities are not. We can do things that the private sector can't do. Third, we teach, and fourth, we do research. Think of it, no other institution in society has these four characteristics, and that makes us uniquely able to develop integrated campus-scale systems, to turn our whole campus into a living laboratory of sustainability, where every single operational decision is a sustainability decision. Of course, it already is a sustainability decision. It's just not usually treated that way. So let's make that explicit, treat the whole operation of the whole campus as a sustainability question, and add teaching and research to all of it that we can. Engage students in projects on campus where we test out sustainability, do stuff the market won't do, and learn from it, research it, teach it. Learn lessons and pass them on to the world. Work with partners in the private sector, in the public sector, in the NGO sector, civil society, to learn these lessons and take this out to the larger world. That's the unique opportunity universities have. But they have to think of this. They have to see this as a strategic opportunity for the university. This isn't about building a subject area. Let's have better environmental studies or physics. No, this is about treating the whole university itself as an entity that will contribute to the sustainability transition in a very direct way. However, there's difficulties in doing this, and one of the biggest difficulties is culture change. Institutional culture change is always the slow variable. It's always the thing that's hard to change in any large institution. Arguably, it's even harder in universities with their kind of medieval structure. And the big problem we found in terms of institutional culture change is the problem of the separation between the academic and the operational side of the house. Almost every university I know is doing a lot of teaching and research on sustainability, and they're also doing a lot of operational sustainability, energy or water or land use, whatever it is. However, these two worlds are very disconnected. Very few universities do the faculty actually know how the university is run or care, because we as academics, our peer group is actually other academics at other institutions. Our promotion and tenure comes from review by people outside the university, not inside the university. So our peer group is external. We don't look inside, we look outside. And there's this big disconnect. I call it the pyramid and the plane. At the operational staff side, people working in the university as full-time employees exist in a kind of hierarchy. They have job descriptions, they have performance evaluation criteria, they have codes of practice, and so on, and they report to bosses. The academics, however, exist in this infinite plane of academia where there is no hierarchy and everybody's equal. And no academic I've ever met thinks they work for the university. The university is there to give me an office space, and the salary comes in pretty handy, but my peer group is someone else. It's not the university. So how do we integrate this? How do we bring the academic and operational together? In my mind, this is the most important challenge facing universities. If they want to make sustainability central to their operations, they have to find a way to integrate operational and academic sustainability. Somehow bring these two. At UBC, we've tried to achieve these opportunities, realize these opportunities by developing two cross-cutting themes that are shown on this slide. The first is campus as living lab, and the second is the university as agent of change. The basic idea of the living lab is to turn the whole campus into an opportunity to demonstrate, teach, learn, and make available lessons from the operation of the campus and the research and teaching. So we have an operations and infrastructure component, a teaching, learning, and research component, and a community outreach component with communication and engagement as part of the way of working with partners. Treat the campus as a living lab, and then work with private, public, and NGO sector partners to learn together and to be an agent of change in the larger community. It's been a long process. I think there's been a big upsurge in activity in the last 5 years, but there's a long history here going back to 1990. I won't go through all of the sustainability milestones. I just put this up to demonstrate that you don't easily achieve these kinds of goals without building up activity over time. Opening a campus sustainability office in 1998 and developing the biggest retrofit program in Canadian university history in 2003, 2004 were all part of the steps required that got us to a point where in 2010 we could develop academic sustainability strategy for the campus as a whole. Here's a picture of the UBC campus. As you can see, it makes a nice living laboratory. Everything you can see pretty much in that picture is part of the UBC campus. It is an opportunity for sustainability, operations, teaching, and research. And you can see the scale. You can sort of get your hands around this scale of operations. It's small enough that you can really act, and yet large enough to teach a lot of useful lessons. This is the same picture, but a rather different view. This is actually the district energy system that underlies the UBC campus, and it's the heart of how we're going to achieve our climate goals. We achieved Kyoto at UBC, a 6% reduction in absolute GHG emissions from 1990 levels by 2007, despite a 35% growth in floor space. That was a significant achievement, but starting from that base, where a lot of the cream has already been skimmed, we're going to get 33%, our targets were 33% reduction by 2015, 67% by 2020, and 100% by 2050. We are not actually quite going to reach the 33% this year, that's this year, but we should reach it by about March of next year. So we're more or less on target for the first 33%, but then we have to get another 33% in the next 5 years. That's going to be very challenging. I think the last 33% is actually going to be relatively easy. However, those climate change goals aren't the whole story. What we would really like to do, and this is my own view rather than the official targets of the university, is to eliminate fossils. That is part of the official target, without increasing electricity transmission lines to campus from our electric power utility. And at the same time to grow about 5 million square feet in floor space, 500,000 square meters in floor space. So that's the real challenge. Imagine if we're able to achieve this. Grow 35% physically, but eliminate fossils and don't increase electricity supply to that jurisdiction, or to in this case, to the campus. That'd be a very cool achievement. That would be a really powerful illustration of the possibility of energy sustainability. So that's the kind of thing a university can set itself up to try and achieve and to learn in that process. There will, of course, be failures, but that's part of the process of learning. There is a roadmap for how to achieve these goals. The 2015 ones are mostly in place now. So they're in bold. The 2020 ones are in normal print, and the 2050 ones are in italics, representing the fact that they're quite a ways off, and things will certainly change between now and then. Nevertheless, it's helpful to have a kind of plan, a way forward. To achieve the 2015 targets, we have 4 main projects. A 72 building continuous optimization program. It's going to save about 1/3 of that 33%. The Center for Interactive Research on Sustainability, I'm going to talk a little bit more about in a minute. That's a building, so it's not going to have big savings on a campus scale, but it's going to be huge on learning. The big one is converting our steam district energy system to hot water. That's a $90 million project that is a huge enabler of sustainability and energy efficiency. It's a way more efficient system, a hot water system, than a steam system. It also is much more friendly to renewable energy than a steam system. So it's an enabling technology that will allow us to do a lot more. And we built a bioenergy 6 megawatt bioenergy R&D facility, which produces heat from biomass, basically waste energy, bio-waste. Those 4 projects cost $150 million. So UBC has spent $150 million in order to achieve its 2015 climate targets. Of course, that's not the only reason for spending that $150 million, but that's a big reason for it. And bundling together purposes to achieve sustainability goals is, of course, one of the standard institutional practices that allow you to do more than if you do single purpose projects. I said I wanted to say a little bit more about the CIRS building, the Center for Interactive Research on Sustainability. I want to say that because this was our first living lab, and the goal of the CIRS building was, in fact, to be regenerative. It was designed in order to be regenerative in both environmental terms, in other words, a building that's net positive in energy, operational carbon, water quality, and structural carbon. Adding a building to UBC's campus will reduce UBC's energy use. Not the building's energy use, the campus energy use, lower because we added a 6,000 square meter building. It will reduce UBC's carbon emissions. It will improve the water quality flowing through that site, and it will sequester more carbon than all the carbon emitted in building the building and in manufacturing everything in it. So that's 4 net positives on the environmental side. The building is also designed to be net positive in terms of health, productivity, and happiness. In other words, the normal operating procedure of the building should make people healthier, more productive, and happier. If we can do those 7 things, then this is truly a regenerative building. We're not succeeding at all of them yet, but that's the point of having this done at a university. It would be very hard for the market to deliver a building like this until it was bulletproof, until they knew they could deliver on all these goals. We know that we're pushing the envelope and we won't immediately deliver on all these goals, but eventually we will, because we're going to treat it as a test bed and as a living lab, learn from it, learn from mistakes, improve them, and then learn how to do it right. On the environmental side, it was a pretty simple concept. Let's get all our water from the sky, all our liquid waste treated on the site, all heating and cooling from the ground or the neighbors or the sun, all light when available from the sun, green electricity, photovoltaics, natural ventilation as well as displacement ventilation, and a wood building. The first 2 make us net positive on water quality, the next 4 on energy and GHG emissions, and the wood structure, of course, on structural carbon. A building that restores the environment around it. Shouldn't all our buildings do this? This is what we need to learn how to do and share that knowledge with society around us. If we look at the actual performance of CIRS to date, you can see the red bar on the left is sort of a typical office building of this type in the Vancouver area, uses in the order of 275, 280 kilowatt hours per square meter per year. You can see CIRS was supposed to use 40% of that, so a 60% reduction. That was what was predicted at the design stage. It's actually a 50% reduction. So on the one hand, this is pretty good. We're only using half as much as a reference building. On the other hand, we're using 25% more than we predicted. And this becomes a huge research issue. We see this problem in buildings all over the world. They're not performing according to prediction. What can we do about that? So that's led to a lot of research into what is actually happening at CIRS. You can see in this chart that the heat recovery from a 2-building system we set up really has not worked as anticipated. We expected 906 megawatt hours to be recovered from a next door building. The waste heat from that building actually only got 129. We were going to send them back 600 of their own heat, now in a useful form or in a useful way. Instead, it was only 129 again. And they didn't receive any of it, really, because of problems with the installation. And therefore, electrical use was higher than expected in the building. So these are the kinds of things we can find out because it's a living lab. We can learn from them. This is Fedoruk 2013. You can see the source at the bottom. That's actually a master's thesis of someone who really drilled down deeply into the building operations. Again, this won't happen in market buildings. It can happen in a university. And we're learning. from this work how to improve the problem. So here's a paper just came out this year in Building Research and Information. Laura Fedorik, you can see, is the first author there. That's the master's student. And this is our paper on learning from failure, how understanding what went wrong and what we fix. On the human side, the basic idea is in office buildings, most people are occupants. That means they're passive recipients of building systems. They don't know where the controls are, even the ones available to them. They maybe can open their window, maybe have some task lighting. That's about it. That's their total engagement with the building. Could we instead be inhabitants? Could we play an active role in the maintenance and performance of our buildings? Could we have a sense of place in and ownership of the building, engagement with the building? That's the goal. And could we do this in a way that would improve productivity, health, and happiness? We think one way to do that is to give the inhabitants of the buildings a suite of benefits and opportunities. And this is the list in the SIRS building. These are the things that we give the inhabitants. Not all of them are yet in place. The ones that are now outlined are the ones that we do provide, and there's some that we still haven't gotten to yet. But we think by offering this suite of benefits and opportunities, and I emphasize it's not just benefits, it's also opportunities for engagement. Engagement is crucial here. We think we will create a process whereby people can feel more like inhabitants, and their health can improve, their productivity can improve, and their happiness as well. We have a PhD thesis on this just being completed as I speak. Moving back out then to the campus scale, here's some of the indicators on our climate change program to date. You can see a 22% absolute reduction by 2014 in GHG emissions. Remember, our target is 33, so we have a lot to do this year and into early next year. You can see that the number of staff and faculty have stayed constant, but number of students at UBC has increased by 18% in that period. So emissions have gone down 22% in absolute terms. Number of students have gone up 18%. So obviously, emissions per student have gone down much more than the 22%. Floor space has gone up as well. 11%, so GHG emissions per square meter have also gone down more than the 22%. So these are pretty significant savings, and they result from a very organized process of having a plan, having it a priority at the university, willingness to spend capital, to make capital investments, and we have a schedule for the next phase of the climate action plan. The preliminary analysis has just been undertaken, and the actions are being assessed. And in a few months, there will be a new plan for getting to 2020. The steering committee that's doing all this has staff, faculty, and students involved in it. The lessons learned so far from these processes of Living Lab and climate change in particular, climate change programming in particular, are that we need these factors. We can achieve very big reductions, but you need these things. You need the organizational confidence to change practices. This is non-trivial. The university has to agree at a fairly senior level that it's really going to act. Government policy in our case is huge. We have a carbon tax. We pay $3 million a year in carbon pricing. That's a big incentive to do a lot of the stuff that we're doing on climate change. You have to use long-term planning in a very explicit way. It has to be embedded in the decision-making process. You have to look for avoided cost opportunities. Really look. There's some unusual ones that won't be immediately apparent. A diversified funding strategy where you go after the normal sources of capital investment, say rental on the student housing, the fees, etc. But you also look at research funds. You look at partnership opportunities. You find a way to combine different sources of funding. You need social license. Your community has to agree. You can't just impose this on the university. You need to get the students engaged, get faculty engaged. You need to build a constituency that supports this kind of change. And then you need implementation that is kind of nimble and flexible, and that will respond to the fact that suddenly natural gas prices drop and a large part of the economic rationale has just disappeared. How do you nevertheless make it viable? And to do all of these other 7 things, you need leadership. The senior management of the university really needs to be engaged, I think, for this to be successful. Here's our capital program overview. We've done $1.4 billion in 43 projects in the last 6 years, and we have almost $1 billion more, 21 projects, distributed across core academic buildings, student housing, community services, athletics, and so on. And there's that $150 million that I mentioned earlier in sustainability projects, but it's actually 165 if we add the Okanagan campus geo-exchange project. That's a separate campus in the interior of British Columbia, which is going to be almost entirely heated with geo-exchange. The policies and practices put in place operationally are minimum LEED Gold certification. We have technical and design guidelines that we slowly build improvements into. We have a design peer review for key building systems. That's really important. And you can see the aspiration here, regenerative buildings. This is an actual official goal of the university. We're building what could become the tallest wood building in the world, although I expect others will come online in the design stage that will be taller than this. But this is an 18-story student residence. So push the envelope on the cross-laminated timber, this revolution in building materials, and sequester carbon in the actual structure. We're taking buildings like the COP building, we're going to tear it down and build faculty and staff housing and treat that entirely as a living lab, build research infrastructure into the actual new building so that we can study especially the health and well-being of the faculty and the staff that will be living in this building. A lot of modeling on how to prevent electricity use preventing electricity use from exceeding the capacity of the delivery from our electric utility, which was 45 essentially MVA. We're building 55. We could go to 65. You can see the bars are what demand would be if we didn't do anything, and you can see we're starting to model how we can reduce that demand to stay under the 50, ideally under the 55 level of capacity of the electricity transmission delivery to the campus. Demand side management targets, you can see the colored part of the bars are the ones that are in place. But you can see we need much more. Those are the gray areas of the bars. We have to get bigger savings to reach our goals by 2020. So we have to figure out what will give us those savings. Green buildings, we do a lot of green buildings, both LEED for the office buildings, and on the residential side, we developed our own assessment procedure and program and rating system called REAP. So we have 25 LEED buildings by 2014 and 31 REAP residential buildings. So that's a big, sorry, we're missing the legend at the bottom. Basically, each group of buildings is a different kind of building, office buildings, classroom buildings, library buildings, and so on. And you can see, what you see here is the EUI, that's the energy intensity index in terms of kilowatt hours per square meter. And for each category of buildings, you can see a big range from very high to very low. But what's disturbing is the green bars in there are the LEED certified buildings. And you'd expect them all to be clustered at the low end of each category of buildings. But in fact, they're not. They're spread evenly throughout. So the LEED buildings are not all performing according to what we would hope in terms of electricity use, at least. So this is the performance gap. This is a huge area of research now at UBC. We're building a campus energy center because of the conversion of the steam system to hot water. And that campus energy center will have the capacity for expansion into cogen and perhaps biomass as well. We're building a neighborhood district energy system for the housing on campus. We have a lot of housing, market housing, but also faculty and staff housing. And we're going to be recovering waste heat from a particle accelerator on campus. 6 megawatts waste heat now exhausted into the atmosphere. Zero waste plan. Can we convert UBC into a zero waste community? We have very significant targets for 2020. We right now have a diversion rate of about 57%. The goal is 80% by 2020, and then more after. Procurement is huge. Supply chain management. We have a very active supply chain management program and payment and purchasing program aimed at sustainability. In order to do all this stuff, we've created a process of developing an operational sustainability strategy over the last 3 years in those 7 areas: water, energy, materials, travel, housing, engagement, and integration. And that strategy is supported by the UBC strategic plan at the highest level, a bunch of campus plans, and then a bunch of implementation measures. So the campus plans, you can see them here. There's resource conservation plans, a bunch of them, and community plans. And those feed directly into the operational strategy and then eventually become implementation frameworks. So we can see in building operations, in IT, in payment and procurement, and in student hospitality and housing services have actually developed a sustainability framework that guides their actions going forward. So there's a lot of activities, a lot of stuff going on to support sustainability at the operational level. I just want to end this part of the presentation by showing you a job description from 2014. We were hiring a new managing director of energy and water services, and look at this. This is the text in the job description. Campus as Living Lab is built into the job description. This is essential. We have to build these things deep into the institutional guts of the institution if we're going to be successful. It's also about social sustainability, which we equate with human well-being. We've created a UBC well-being initiative that works across those functions of the university: access and diversity, intercultural understanding, First Nations, sport and sustainability, healthy campus, community engagement, community service learning. The initial priorities of this well-being initiative are mental health on campus, a huge crisis at UBC as in many other universities, physical activity, inclusion and connection, food and nutrition, transportation, and built environments. We're developing a campus sustainability engagement strategy. The cool thing here is the link between the programs at the bottom in blue and the infrastructure. There's no point designing sustainable infrastructure if you don't have the programs so that it will be used properly. At the same time, if you only have the programs and the infrastructure doesn't support behavior change, you're in trouble. So you need to do both. It's also about visual identity of the campus. So we are creating a program that will create a visual identity for sustainability on campus. A lot of sustainability is invisible. It's behind the wall. So you need this process of sort of branding and creating a visual identity. The new Student Union building will be built to LEED Platinum, has been built to LEED Platinum. It's just opened. It's a very cool building. And it's at the heart of the campus. We're building these commons blocks. Of course, they're LEED Gold, and they're big. They're residents, putting a lot of students right at the center of campus. But more importantly, they combine these functions: offices, classrooms, cafe, convenience store, a collegium for off-campus students who don't live on campus, fitness center, learning spaces, childcare facility, end-of-trip bike storage, art gallery. The idea is to create very dense pockets of human activity combined with student residences. So high density social sustainability. In the neighborhoods around the edge of campus where we have housing, we want to grow those neighborhoods, 11,000 people in 2001, up to perhaps 40,000 people by 2041. That's a huge increase, but you can do a lot more sustainability with 40,000 people, the density of 40,000 people, than 11,000 people in the same land area. So we see this big opportunity. Here's what's happened so far. You can see the daytime population has gone up about 50% since 1997. The number of residents has gone up over a factor of 2. Look at the transit. Transit trips have quadrupled to campus from 19,000 a day to 80,000 a day. Auto trips are dropping. And parking, we've taken almost half of the surface parking out of service and built housing on it. Way more sustainable, way better for people, and more lucrative for the university. Agent of change, moving beyond living lab. What we need is new forms of partnership, new kind of models of interaction, and transforming the institutional roles and processes that govern the way the universities engage with the world. This is the concept. We've had strategic alliance with 4 main organizations, our electric power utility, the City of Vancouver, the University Neighborhoods Association, that's the association of people living on our campus, whether working or studying at UBC or not, and then a developer in China who builds 16 million square feet a year of sustainable condos. I just want to mention one of these partnerships. This is the one with the City of Vancouver. We have a lot of shared sustainability goals because the City of Vancouver has made it a key priority to become sustainable. What we do, one of the programs we do with them is we give them scholars. We give them grad students on 250-hour internships each year. It can be in the summer or spread out over the year to work on sustainability goals. The city loves this. They love it so much that they came to us and said, we want to double the number we pay for these students. We give them $5,000 each for this internship. The city said, we want 20, not 10. We said, we can't afford it. They said, we'll pay for the extra 10. So they're now paying for half. That made us think, well, if they'll pay for it, maybe others will as well. That's led to a great expansion of the program. The idea is they put in the 250 hours, very organized process. The city does a call internally looking for projects. They vet and review the projects to make sure they're real. They come up with their list, and we recruit the students. We could never find projects for our students. The city could never find students for their projects. They don't know how to do that. So it's a perfect marriage where we combine forces. We create these projects and these internships. And of the first 4 years, 10 a year in the first 4 years with the city, they hired 8 of those 40 full-time, which wasn't part of the plan, but is a really good indicator of its success. So we're growing the program because we now see that others will pay to do internships. We can grow it beyond our budget limit. We now have 9 partners, and the target is to have 60 scholars this year. So this has been a huge success. It's a way for the university to engage with this, the surrounding community. But we have a bigger ambition. That's the Scholars Program. There's the 39 that we had last year. We also have a Seeds program where about 800 students a year work on sustainability projects on campus through their courses. We also have the the Center for Community Engaged Learning, which puts 4,000 students a year out into the community already on other kinds of projects. And we have our Work Learn program that gives funding to hire students to work on campus in departments on projects. So we've put all these 4 groups together. They're all quite separate. And we're thinking that we could have a program where we have thousands of students working with partners on sustainability projects off campus and on campus, grad students and undergrad students, for credit, not for credit projects, unpaid and paid projects. So a big mixture, but thousands altogether, maybe 4,000 in the community and 2,000 on campus, something like that. That starts to become significant. We created an innovator working group where we work with 3 other universities, ASU, Texas at Austin, UC Davis, on sharing experience on some of the operational sustainability issues. The idea is to be a kind of regional think tank on sustainability. Okay, turning now to teaching and learning. I want to spend a few minutes talking about that because this is a huge part of what we do. Can we transform the curriculum at UBC so that every student will have access to what we call a sustainability pathway, a way of adding sustainability to their program, no matter what program they're in. So whether they're in bioresource engineering or they're in medieval literature, it doesn't matter. They will be offered a sustainability pathway when they first arrive at UBC, and they will have the option of adding that sustainability content up to a minor into their program. The goal is therefore to transform the whole curriculum of the university to allow this to have happen. We want the students to represent or to be able to demonstrate their ability in these four areas that you can see on the right: systems thinking, substantive sustainability knowledge, integrative interdisciplinarity, and an orientation towards positive change in the world. So we're developing a suite of sustainability-oriented courses and experiences, and we will be offering them to students in an integrated way so that they can add sustainability to their program. There's the attributes we think are essential. Every student adding a sustainability pathway should show experience in this, whether they're an engineer or a scientist or an artist or a historian. All of these four would still apply. Here's an example of the concept of the pathway. You take first year courses that are required courses already but have sustainability embedded into them. Then there'd be the end of year one or the beginning of year two, an introductory sustainability course, a bunch of sustainability electives that we have vetted and approved, and a bunch of community engagement courses, community service learning courses that allow people to work out in the community, ending with a capstone leadership course. And all the way through, after the first year courses, we create a cohort-based community so that you're part of a larger group of people working through the sustainability pathway. We have a very flexible structure because it depends on the department. Engineering programs are different than science programs, different than arts programs. So we have to allow for, obviously, the particularities of those different programs. We can have embedded programs where we put sustainability in existing courses. We can add on minors or areas of concentration, or we can actually create majors in sustainability, some of which already exist. The big development was to put sustainability programming into those 7 big first-year courses: psychology, geography, biology, chemistry, math, applied science, and sociology. We inject sustainability into each of those. Every student at UBC takes at least one of these big first-year courses. So we're reaching all incoming students, and then we work with individual departments and units on second and third and fourth-year courses. We give grants, we create fellows. You can see a picture of them to the right, who work with us, and we give them either to become a fellow. You apply to get a pathway grant application, which is that you're going to work on pathways in your unit and your faculty, and we give spotlight grants where we fund instructors to add sustainability content. So the people who receive those grants become our fellows and work with us on the larger strategic sustainability programming, curriculum programming. And then we create a source database of the over 600 courses now at UBC that have sustainability content. And we have fellows. We've had fellows in most of the faculties at UBC, and we will eventually have them in all of the faculties of UBC as we work our way through the system. We provide students. This is an example of a chart for students to talk to them about how they can learn sustainability, they can build towards a career, they can give back to the community, they can have fun. So this is part of the student engagement component. We have participation programs where our staff run programs that involve students and staff, and engagement programs where we actually go out and engage people on sustainability issues. And we have a resource hub where students can come and learn about what the possibilities are. The students themselves are very active. It's not just what we do. These are some of the student projects. I'll mention only one right in the middle, AMS Sustainability. AMS is the Undergraduate Student Society. They give out $100,000 a year in sustainability grants, usually little grants of $5,000 to $8,000 to students who want to do a sustainability project. They tax themselves through the fees for AMS, and they give this money back to students to do sustainability projects. That's pretty cool. On the research side, I have less to say. We're just starting actively on this. There's a lot of research in sustainability, and we need to move in a more organized way to try to promote and develop it further. This has all culminated in the production last year of a 20-year sustainability strategy at UBC, sort of next generation sustainability at UBC, organized into the three components that I mentioned at the beginning of my talk: teaching, learning, and research, operations and infrastructure, and the community. We did a big engagement process. We engaged thousands of students, faculty, and staff in developing this strategy to build social license and to build the constituency for change. I want to mention the Musqueam acknowledgement. The lands in BC are unceded territory of the First Nations. There's no treaties, so we worked with Musqueam, the Musqueam Nation, to get a acknowledgement and acceptance of the plan. And here's the vision. At UBC's Vancouver campus, sustainability means simultaneous improvements in human and environmental well-being, not just reductions in damage or harm. By 2035, such regenerative sustainability is embedded across the university throughout teaching, learning, research, partnerships, operations, and infrastructure, and the UBC community. UBC is a vibrant, healthy, and resilient community, deeply engaged with its neighbors, surrounding region, partners around the world, and in a supportive and mutually respectful relationship with the Musqueam people. Let me end with a couple of conclusions about transformative change at UBC. We find that the barriers to change are usually institutional. They're not as much economic or technical. They have to do with job descriptions, performance evaluation criteria, standard practices, professional obligations, those kinds of institutional rules that govern the way people act. If you change those rules, you change the system. But you have to get down into the guts of the institution to see that. We found it crucial that we, USI, the office I ran, didn't do all these things, but enabled them. We didn't teach. We don't do research as part of the USI activities. We don't run buildings. We enable, foster, facilitate, encourage, and help others to do those things. So we're not in competition with people. We're actually helping them do what they want to do. This concept of regenerative sustainability has real resonance. People really like the idea of net positive, of doing good, not just doing less bad. It's crucial to have very many different scales of interaction, to operate at multiple levels, and to engage the community really actively, especially the students. And you don't get there without continuous effort. I say there are 5 metaphors. I don't have time to go through them, but we've developed these metaphors to describe the process of continuous engagement over time. You can't stop. You can't just set in place a program and walk away. It requires continuous engagement. So that's my talk. Thank you very much.